What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So the iPhone 14 Pro is Apple's third iteration now in the Pro lineup. And in using the past few Pro iPhones, including this one, I have some thoughts on what's supposed to be the highest end Apple smartphone. For starters, it's no secret that the entire iPhone 14 lineup this year is a bit lackluster. The regular iPhone 14 received basically no new changes or updates. And with Apple putting more emphasis and effort on the Pro phones, I'm starting to suspect that the regular iPhones will morph back into what was previously the budget iPhone, like the XR, and the Pro iPhones will become the iPhone, the one that gets all the new changes and updates. Part of me feels like that's okay though. There needs to be more that separates the Pro iPhones from the regular iPhones. And it seems like the only way to do that is to just stop upgrading the regular iPhones as much, which Apple seemingly did this year. But with the Pro iPhones, there also needs to be continued updates and upgrades that make the phone not just better than the year before, but have Apple pushing the boundaries. And I'm not sure that they've really been doing that, especially this year. The Pro distinction on the iPhone 14 Pro I feel holds a lot less weight than in years past, simply because the Pro features that Apple touts are almost industry standard features for all smartphones now, over say $500, and some aspects, like slower than average charging speeds, are notably worse than even some 2022 budget devices. The Pro features are limited to mainly the camera. Most everything else that differentiates this phone from the regular isn't necessarily Pro, and in fact, I almost feel, like I said in my iPhone 14 Pro Max review, that Apple should be aiming towards offering a kind of iPhone Ultra instead. The iPhone 14 Pro obviously would not be worthy of an Ultra distinction. It needs to be a whole lot more. With all that being said, I'm going to go over what technically still makes the iPhone 14 Pro a Pro iPhone this year, so you can determine if those certain features and specs are worth the many extra hundreds of dollars you may spend versus a regular iPhone. And let me know in the comments if you think Pro iPhones are still worth it, or if there's maybe some things Apple should add that would better fulfill that Pro title. By the way, since Apple doesn't include a charger in the box anymore, I'd highly recommend getting some better, faster charging accessories for all your tech. And Ugreen has some great new products to power up your holiday season. They sent me over one heck of a holiday care package that includes their DigiNest 65-watt power strip, a great desk add-on with USB-A and USB-C ports, in addition to 3 traditional AC outlets to power up to 7 devices at once. They also gave me a new USB-C hub for my laptop, which has USB 3.0, HDMI, and Ethernet ports, and SD and TF card slots, a couple super strong nylon braided lightning cables, which every iPhone user should get, and their Nexode 100-watt 4-port charger, which is my personal favorite of the bunch. This is the perfect office accessory to power up all your gear. You could charge up an M2 MacBook Air to 100% in less than an hour and a half with the full 100 watts of power, or do what I do and plug in a MacBook, an iPhone, an iPad, and even some earbuds, and charge them all up at once with the power spread across all 4 devices. With this on my desk, it actually keeps everything clutter-free. It's simple, compact, and keeps everything I need juiced up without a big mess of cables everywhere. You can grab the Nexode 100-watt desk charger or the entire Ugreen holiday gift box at the link down below in the video description. And thanks so much again to Ugreen for powering up my holiday season and for sponsoring this video. So one of the ways in which Apple likes to separate the Pro iPhones from the regular is with the build. And I should say that it's simply the materials, not so much the durability, that's the differentiating factor. The frosted matte glass and stainless steel finish on the Pro iPhones is no doubt super premium. The phone looks nice, feels heavy, there's a certain sense of quality that goes along with it, but the regular iPhones are also glass and metal. And of course, the polished stainless steel on these Pro iPhones, like any polished material, actually looks a whole lot worse after some use, with fingerprints and scratches. Pair all that with the fact that I have absolutely destroyed the front glass on my iPhone 14 Pro, likely from having some other phones in my pocket rubbing against this one, and you can see that there's nothing particularly pro about the build. It's shiny, it's nice to look at, but it's not any more durable or better, regardless of Apple's ceramic shield on the front or sapphire glass on the camera. Now, I'm not saying that I want some rugged, rubbery, and plastic iPhone either, but Pro isn't really the right term here. Premium makes more sense. Now, technically, the only redesign we saw on the new iPhones this year is the new dynamic island notch up top that came on just the Pro iPhones. And after going back and forth on this quite a bit, I've come to the conclusion that it's fine sometimes, but I don't really see it catching on. The dynamic island is this fluid area around the speaker and selfie camera and Face ID sensors that are all still there, but blending into that stuff, you'll sometimes see some notifications or app controls that whoosh on into this little widget that you can then interact with. So for example, your music or video controls will pop up there. You'll see like your timer, some notifications, phone calls, low battery pop-ups, stuff like that. And every once in a while, I might tap on the dynamic island to bring me back to an application or control the playback controls of something I'm listening to, but the longer I've had this phone, the less I've actually used any of it. And in fact, I've also noticed that the dynamic island is consistently inconsistent. App animations aren't always fluid and don't always show or interact the same way, and every once in a while, my phone will actually glitch out and keep jumping back into the app that's associated with the dynamic island, even if I'm swiping up to go home. I'm also generally not a fan of the tap and hold controls. I feel like they should be reversed, so tap to show the widget and tap to hold to get back into the app. All in all, there's nothing pro about the dynamic island, and like I've said, I actually think this feature will wind up going the way of like 3D touch. It'll be here for another iteration or two of the iPhones, but ultimately scrapped as its usefulness becomes less and less apparent. As far as the screen itself, Apple's new brighter Super Retina display on the iPhone 14 Pro is about as much of a pro display as they could call it. And in fact, I think it does far exceed what you get on most other smartphones this year. So its full nomenclature is the LTPO Super Retina XDR OLED panel. It's a lot of letters. And resolution-wise, it's about the same strange 1179 by 2556 setup as the regular iPhone 14. So it's not any sharper. And actually, the bold OLED colors on this phone looks similar to the XDR OLED screen on the regular iPhone 14. But the two important elements here, in my opinion, are the brightness and the 120Hz Pro Motion feature. The iPhone 14 Pro's peak brightness is now 2000 nits. That's what you'd get with auto brightness enabled outdoors. And compared to the 1200 nits on the regular iPhone 14, the difference is like night and day. But even the user-controlled max brightness of about 1000 nits is noticeably brighter than the 800 nits on the regular iPhone. And in my opinion, it's very, very obvious just how bright the 14 Pro is now. Noticeably and significantly brighter than any iPhone, of course, but it also exceeds similar Android flagships like the Pixel 7 Pro, for example. So this was a great change. And outdoor viewing on the 14 Pro is way better with far less glare and far more visible screen. The other element I mentioned, the 120Hz Pro Motion feature, is great too, and you get that adaptive refresh rate that gives you a smooth, fluid feel with all your taps, touches, and scrolls. I think a lot of people value this, even if maybe the average consumer still may not notice or even care, but you have to keep in mind that a high refresh rate display, at even a rate higher than this, has been the industry standard for a number of years, and some budget Android devices in the $300 range even offer 90 or 120Hz high refresh rate displays. So while it's great Apple has this on the Pro iPhones this year, they actually brought it for the first time last year, they've been way behind, and this is simply no longer a Pro feature by any measurement. Okay, so let's talk specs. And I gotta be honest, this is an aspect of the iPhone 14 lineup that really grinds my gears. The iPhone 14 Pro is powered by Apple's newest A16 Bionic processor. I think we all expected a new chipset for a new iPhone. Apple does this every year to make the phone better, faster, more powerful, but the regular iPhones didn't get the newest chipset. And because of that, you can technically say that the iPhone 14 Pros are finally better performance-wise than the regular iPhone 14s, but that's only because you're comparing it to last year's specs. This is a really cheap sort of cop-out change with the 14 Pros. Rather than introducing some Pro chipset or even an A16 Ultra like they've done with the M1 Max, Apple simply just didn't upgrade the regular iPhones and gave the 14 Pros the obligatory new year, new chipset update. Now, yes, year over year, iPhones aren't as noticeably more powerful as they once were. In fact, the last 2 or 3 years of iPhones haven't really been that much better performance-wise. At least I don't think so in my daily usage. But it's the principle of the thing. You can't say that the Pro iPhones are better than the regular iPhones when the comparison you're making is literally last year's tech. That doesn't even make the Pro iPhones Pro. It just makes them a 1 year newer regular iPhone. I don't know that I have any real suggestion to fix this weird upgrade cycle now. I'd like to have the Pro iPhones have a Pro processor, or maybe have Apple do something ultra with the iPhones. But the main point here is that the iPhone 14 Pros aren't really purposefully better than the regular iPhones when it comes to performance. They just received an upgrade, while the regular 14s did not. And that's just not a very good look. It's super lazy, it's a bit insulting, and it's not at all what makes the iPhone 14 Pro a pro device. Now, when it comes to the battery and charging, this is a little bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, Apple almost always tries to offer better battery life on the new iPhones versus the previous year, and with the iPhone 14 Pros, that's the case once again. The claims of up to some 20-something hours of use that Apple circulates are certainly extreme single-use examples. Everyone's daily iPhone usage is different, with apps, games, phone calls, social media usage, and everything else. But in general, I've found the 14 Pros to get maybe an extra hour or so of battery life each day, which is not nothing, but it's nothing game-changing. The Achilles heel of all iPhones really is charging. While pretty much every other smartphone manufacturer with a Pro or Ultra phone is able to offer 40 to 50 watt charging at a minimum, and in some cases 100 plus watt charging, at least as a proof of concept, Apple hasn't increased its charging speeds for years, and in fact hasn't introduced any new, better, or faster charging speeds on any iPhone for some time, at least not anything significant or worthwhile. And I don't really get that. While Apple has never pushed the limits for charging speeds on any of their devices, it seems unusual that power, battery capacity, longevity, charging speeds, additional features have never really been of any interest. And I think this is where Apple could implement some big, significant changes for future iPhones, especially with the Pro, like a bigger battery that lasts 2 full days, or doubling the charging speeds, or adding reverse wireless charging to charge some AirPods, for example. But for now, power and battery life are far from being Pro. So finally, year over year, the Pro feature with the Pro iPhones has been with the cameras. And this year, that's once again the same story. This is also where the iPhone 14 Pro sees much of its upgrade from the previous year. The main camera lens is now a 48 megapixel shooter, paired with a more capable 12 megapixel telephoto lens with 3 times optical zoom. And the third lens is also an improved 12 megapixel 120 degree ultra wide lens. The selfie camera seems relatively unchanged, but inside the camera app, Apple of course delivers a number of shooting modes and features that both the average consumer and pro filmmaker can take full advantage of. Now, there's plenty of stuff here that I don't even use. I'm not some cinematographer, I'm a relatively average picture and video taker, but I like my extra abilities from time to time. And while you shouldn't use this feature with every picture, the new 48 megapixel Pro RAW option certainly delivers some incredibly detailed images. The improved macro mode for up-close pictures is also a welcome change. The additional portrait pick options for 2x and 3x zoom for varying depths of field are also super nice. The super smooth video stabilization is also something I noticed as well. That's an improvement. Like I said, I use my iPhone mainly for the simple stuff. I'm not a pro picture or video taker, which maybe means I shouldn't be using the Pro iPhone. But there are a number of elements here, like Apple's ProRes video formats and cinematic mode, and even the various photo styles that other folks will find much more useful than I do, and might actually justify that Pro distinction. So I'll give Apple that. If they call this iPhone 14 Pro a Pro phone specifically because of the camera features and the shooting modes, that's fine, but for everything else, I don't see much more that justifies it being Pro. Overall, the Pro features that make up the iPhone 14 Pro this year seem to be less enticing than in years past, and in fact, do less in defining the device as a Pro smartphone as a whole. The shiny stainless steel is no more Pro than any other material. The display is far less Pro and more just on par with everyone else. The specs are certainly not Pro, and are simply being compared to one-year-old components now. And the camera, well, that's certainly Pro at least, but if that's the only definitive Pro feature now, where does that really leave us? I think the iPhone 14 Pro has a lot to offer, but I'm having a hard time seeing the Pro elements to it. But what do you guys think? Am I maybe missing something here? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though, or at least found it helpful. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.